It's Friday, February 27th, 2026. We've got a Friday 5-pack including Iran. Are they rejecting any sort of negotiations from henceforth? Also, AI coming for 4,000 jobs. And Ask Her Tell Me Anything. Next on the AM Update. According to the Wall Street Journal, Iran has rejected all U.S. demands in the latest rounds of nuclear talks. Iran's foreign minister also said these words, quote, "Today was one of the best, most serious, and longest rounds of negotiations. We made good progress and seriously engaged with elements of a deal regarding both nuclear and sanctions issues. We are close to understanding on some issues, though differences remain on others." Secretary of State Marco Rubio says,
"Well, let me put it to you this way. If in fact what you're interested in is a peaceful nuclear program, you can do it like most of the countries in the world do it, which is they have above ground reactors and they import the fuel. We have deals now to do that with countries. If what they really wanted was energy from, they could do small modular reactors, which is something that's quite affordable and achievable for a lot of countries. But when you say we want to enrich, and we want to enrich deep underground, and you have a history in the past of enriching to 20 and even 60%, plus you're building missiles that could potentially carry warheads, that doesn't sound to me like someone who's a country that's not interested in building weapons. So it's not just the rhetorical, it's the actions to back the rhetoric, which we simply haven't seen."
So you're looking for a commitment to zero-enrichment?
Well, they don't need to enrich in order to have nuclear energy. They don't need nuclear energy, by the way. They have plenty of natural gas. But if they wanted nuclear energy, they could have it the way other countries have it. The fact that they refuse to get it that way, the fact that they insist not just on enrichment, but on enrichment in locations located inside of mountains is, I think you would have to lack common sense to not know what that means or what that could mean.
So does the United States have a red line or do they not? The coming days, I think, will tell the story. Back at home, Border Czar Tom Homan responded to Pope Leo this week, saying, among other things, again, that the United States is really mean to immigrants.
What is your response to Pope Leo for being critical of the Trump administration when it comes to deporting illegals?
Well, look, I'm a lifelong Catholic, still practicing Catholic. Catholic faith is always in support of law enforcement, always has been, and he should be too. I've said it many times before, you ought to be fixing the Catholic Church because they got their own issues. But bottom line is, if we jump the wall at the Vatican, the penalties for doing that are much harder than the ones here in the United States into the country lately. So, look, what he doesn't understand is the flip side to illegal immigration. 31% of women get raped making that journey. Over 4,000 aliens died making that journey under Joe Biden. 250,000 Americans died of fentanyl because of the open border. When you overwhelm the Border Patrol, all the bad things happening. Sex trafficking increases, fentanyl increases. Securing the border saves lives. And I'd be happy to sit down and explain it to him. Illegal immigration is not a victimless crime. So President Trump having illegal immigration on 96%, he's saving thousands of lives every year.
Good on Border Czar Tom Homan yet again, putting the Pope, that would be the leader of his church, in his place. Block, which I will admit is a company I've never heard of. It's run by former Twitter CEO and co-founder Jack Dorsey. Block, the company, said Thursday it's laying off more than 4,000 employees, or about half of its headcount. The stock skyrocketed more than 24% in extended trading. Jack Dorsey, the aforementioned, said, quote, "Today we shared a difficult decision with our team. We're reducing Block by nearly half from over 10,000 people to just under 6,000, which means that over 4,000 people are being asked to leave or entering into consultation." Block CFO Amrita Ahuja said the job cuts will position the company for our next phase of long-term growth. Dorsey said he expects other companies to similarly overhaul their workforces as they see more efficiency gains from intelligence tools. 4,000 jobs at this company just vaporized by AI. Unfortunately, I think there is a non-zero, and I'm not talking about, a point something chance. I'm talking about a high single digit to teen chance that very shortly, like within the next 2 years, this story will be prevalent. Whether or not AI is ready for it, that's another question. But a lot of these companies, If they see roles that artificial intelligence can do in place of humans, you can bet they're seeing Block's stock price and they're taking notes. Check out this story out of California, courtesy of KCAL News.
And I want to confess to you, for those of you who may not know, I would be a hypocrite if I did not fight for those who today are facing conditions that over 40 years I faced as an undocumented migrant to this country. I want to repeat that.
In case you're wondering, that's the voice of the LA Unified School District admitting on camera he's been an illegal alien in America for 40 years. The FBI raided his residence and office this week.
I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world, regardless of my position today, if today I did not fight for those who find themselves in the same predicament I faced over 40 years ago when I arrived in this country at the age of 17 as an undocumented immigrant. Education made me and saved me. I became a teacher, a principal, a superintendent leading the nation's largest districts, 4 times selected as National Superintendent of the Year. Do not underestimate the power of the immigrant child who may very well become an adult who does well and good by America. If I come
blah,
across...
blah, 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 blah. Los Angeles Unified School District Superintendent Alberto Carvalho's home and office was raided this week. He then commenced to admit on camera being an illegal alien. Apparently, according to some reports, upwards of $70 million of taxpayer money missing. Student attendance records falsified, among other claims he's being investigated for, according to some reports. Finally, on our Friday 5-pack, we go to Vice President J.D. Vance, who was in Wisconsin, and he brought the jokes.
Again, you're sitting there, and then the president gets to the point where he says, you know what? We are going to stop congressmen and congresswomen from getting rich off of insider trading, from violating the public trust that you have put in them and get rich off of insider trading. Of course, a lot of people stand up and cheer. Most of the Democrats don't. You know who was not standing up and cheering? Nancy Pelosi. I have never seen a person more angry in my life than Nancy Pelosi when the President of the United States is calling out insider trading. Ladies and gentlemen, my hope for all of you, of course, is that we can make you richer and more prosperous and safer in your communities. But my hope for all of you is that you find somebody who loves you as much as Nancy Pelosi loves insider trading, because then you will have a very good life indeed.
That's not even joking. That's just spitting straight truth right there. Just spitting straight truth. Find you somebody who loves you as much as Nancy Pelosi loves insider trading. When we come back, it'll be your turn to ask or tell me anything. That's coming up next. Time for Ask or Tell Me Anything, your chance to ask me any question you want, tell me any news story you think needs covered on the AM Update. Let's start with James. From a biblical perspective, is it covetousness to want the economic conditions our parents had, where one job was enough to sustain a household and afford a home? No, I don't think it is covetousness to want or desire those economic conditions. However, I do think it crosses the line into covetousness when you start resenting that generation. You start resenting the present for not being those conditions. It's never a bad thing to desire to provide for your family, to give the most opportunities for your family. It's not covetousness at all. In fact, your desire is actually proof that, man, that's the spark that God gave you as a man is in there. That you want those things. You want those good things for your family. However, if you start to resent your current circumstances, if you start to resent your parents and grandparents for enjoying those circumstances, enjoying is the operative word there, of course, while you are in whatever circumstance you find yourself in, I do think that's where it crosses the line into covetousness. Remember, coveting is the act of wishing someone else's possessions, circumstances, wealth were your own. Wanting that in the abstract is not a bad thing, but wanting your parents starting to resent them, that means you specifically want what they had. That's when I think it crosses the line into covetousness. Listen, I'm a millennial, and even I'm sensitive to this as well, because typically when these conversations come up, we're talking about boomers, silent generation, things of that nature. It's just not a ubiquitous experience amongst boomers. Corporately it is amongst that generation, but it's not a ubiquitous experience that every single boomer born all the way around the fruited plain just had it easy from day one. That's just not true. Many of them, in fact, maybe even a majority of them just did not. And really, truly did have to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. Now, in the act of pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, it just so happened to coincide with one of the most lucrative and booming wealth eras of human history. Now, does that mean that corporately they are absolved of any sort of ignorance? No. Corporately, are they absolved as a generation of any sort of responsibility for our current circumstances? No. Does that mean you should resent them individually? Absolutely not. That's a good question, though, James. John Essig, Tucker's Israel trip / being hassled. What's your question? Yeah, I thought his story about Israel, getting to Israel, being quote unquote detained, according to the Daily Mail, I thought that was just laughable, especially given he was on camera taking a selfie with what purportedly is the person who quote unquote detained him. That's all I said. Are you a Zionist? Somebody asked me after I panned Tucker Carlson for that, as if that's a bad thing. I'm convinced most people don't know what Zionism actually is. Somebody was in my mentions in a nastygram after I panned Tucker Carlson. Are you a Zionist? Are you a Zionist? As if that's their version of racist. Zionism simply, especially in this day and age, maybe when the term first started coming around, almost 100 years ago, maybe it was more charged back then. It certainly is not now. Zionism simply means that you believe the Jews have a historical and moral claim, not right, but claim to the spit of land in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's all it means. That's all it means. I've heard even people who are overtly and want you to know overtly what they think of the Jews, and it's not a very good opinion. I've heard people like that say that the Jews have a historical and moral claim to that spit of land. I think there has been an intentional and malicious redefinition of Zionism to mean something that it's really not. Now, that's an entire can of worms. Maybe next week, if that piques anybody's interest, I can talk about that next week on Ask or Tell Me Anything. But somebody came in my mentions after my little brief pan of Tucker Carlson on, I think it was Monday's show. Are you a Zionist? Tucker, blah, 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 blah. Are you a Zionist? Like, what are you, a little lefty, purple hair on a college campus? Racist, bigot, homophobe. Get out of here. Light the Dark CA says, will a Trump administration pursue an enduring victory by reforming or abolishing child protective services, given how often it's been used to persecute Christian families rather than protect children? Well, if I'm not mistaken, child protective services is largely just a state program. Each state has a version of this. Now, I'm sure they receive federal funds, grants, what have you. But this is very much a state issue. Now, you could maybe issue some executive orders. Congress, and let's not talk about Congress. You could maybe issue some executive orders, some recommendations for state child protective services or whatever derivation there is. But that's largely a state issue, so there's not much that Trump unilaterally could do. Congress could... Never mind. Sholva 81189 says, will you be watching Candace... Nope, I won't. Nah. I'm not going to be watching that. And you shouldn't either. I'd like to say that much of Candace Owens's audience are just rubberneckers Like when you see a train crash or you see an accident on the highway and you just can't take your eyes off of it. I would love to say that, but I don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of people who, at best, are extremely naive and gullible and are just eating this up and like it. I think that's probably more likely. It's not that they're naive or gullible. They probably deep down know that what she's doing, but they just like the drama. Aunt Petunia says, how should Christians biblically discern reports of miracles like weeping icons or supernatural signs in Catholic and Orthodox traditions? Should these be viewed as works of God or tested as potential deceptions in light of Scripture's warnings about false signs and wonders? This is also a good question. I happen to think that perhaps the Catholic Church maybe places too much of an emphasis on some of these things. There are some other traditions as well who maybe place too much of an emphasis on these things. I will give them the benefit of the doubt on some level that for Marian apparitions, they go through some of them go through a decades-long process through the church in an attempt to prove their validity or disprove their validity. Now, Marian apparitions, that's another can of worms in and of itself. Do I believe that miracles still happen today? Yes, I do. I believe even more so that very miraculous things happen, whose explanation, even if you can find a scientific way through it, the science behind it, what caused the science to happen, the only explanation is supernatural. I do believe things like that happen today. I listened to a missionary one time when I was very young talk about trekking through the jungle, I think in South America. And the people group that he was trying to reach, that he later did reach, one of those men in this indigenous tribe, one of those men recounted to him, once he came to saving faith in Jesus Christ, I think I'm getting this story right, that he actually saw this missionary passing through the jungle and had either his bow or maybe they had a gun. I think it was maybe a gun. Indigenous people had guns. I think they had some contact with the outside world that allowed them to get guns, but was about to shoot this missionary. And this tribal man told this missionary, I think years later, that I tried to pull the trigger, but I could not. I physically could not pull the trigger. The gun worked afterwards, it worked beforehand, but I could not pull the trigger. How do you explain that? Now, does that mean maybe that's just a fantastical tale that this missionary conjured up in order to get more support? You couldn't take the most cynical view of things like that. But honestly, if you believe the Holy Spirit is alive and well and abiding in millions, if not billions of people all over the world, how could you not just offhand, I guess I should put it this way, how could you just offhand dismiss every purported miracle? I just don't think you can. Now, where I fall down on this is I do believe miracles exist and happen even today. I do not believe that you can conjure miracles. Kind of like some in the more charismatic traditions, they believe they can basically conjure miracles. Now, that's not how they would describe it, and maybe that's an unfair to them description of it, but I don't believe Benny Hinn, I can just wave my suit jacket around and heal people and be slain in the spirit. That's theatrical. But I do believe miracles happen. I also believe you shouldn't really be too obsessed with them, nor should you dismiss all of them. Jeff says, how do we prepare our children for economic collapse and civil war when all their public school friends will run to communism? Well, I don't think this is a cop-out answer. Hopefully it doesn't come off as that. But you should prepare your children the way every generation should prepare their children, with the knowledge that the children of men are more cunning than the children of God. Meaning, you need to be prepared and preparing them at appropriate times for the world out there. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Economic prosperity, as we discussed earlier, never guaranteed at all. In this world, you will have trouble. That's the guarantee. The poor you will always have with you. That's a guarantee. His mercies are new every morning. That's also a guarantee. So the way you would prepare your children for economic collapse when their friends are all running to communism is the same way every generation should prepare their children. You must not fear tomorrow, because tomorrow isn't even guaranteed. You must do the best. You must do the most good with the tools, talents, abilities, and platforms that God gives you today. And you should model that. Concentrate on modeling that to your children every single day. So, no, I don't have any specifics like digging a bunker, though that might be fun. Good workout, and maybe a good lesson on architecture and whatever the word is for making sure you're framing things up correctly. Might be a good lesson for that. Not talking about doom prepping. You can be prudent if you would like to, and do that if you would like to. But at the end of the day, modeling to your children what it looks like to truly live is going to best prepare them for how to truly live. That's going to do it for this Friday. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Back at it again on Monday.